Jabulani Ngcobo called himself Cashflow. He drove a Bentley worth 3 million rand, wore designer clothes, and threw parties that made headlines. He told people he'd become a millionaire before turning 26. He claimed to have brought forex trading to South Africa's black communities, framing himself as a financial liberator. Thousands followed him on social media, studying his posts, attending his events, hoping to learn the formula for wealth. But on May 7, 2019, a court in Durban convicted him of fraud and sentenced him to 6 years in prison. The reason wasn't that he lost people's money in bad trades. The reason was simpler and more damning. He was never legally allowed to trade forex for anyone in the first place. Ngcobo built his entire identity around the nickname Cashflow. He positioned himself as the chief executive of a forex trading enterprise, sometimes calling it Cashflow Properties. The name itself was a marketing tool, suggesting constant money movement, prosperity on demand. He didn't present himself as just another trader trying to make it. He presented himself as the pioneer who had opened the door for others, specifically for black South Africans who had been shut out of financial markets. His entire pitch rested on this narrative. I figured it out, and now I'm sharing the secret. The appeal was rooted in youth and visible wealth. Ngcobo was in his early 30s when his legal troubles culminated in conviction, meaning he had built this empire while still young. The cars, the properties, the lifestyle, they all served as proof. For people unfamiliar with forex markets, the display of luxury was the only due diligence they conducted. If he had the cars, he must know what he's doing. If he had the properties, the system must work. Ngcobo wasn't working alone. His co-defendant, Mzabalazo welcomed Dlamini, was convicted alongside him on the same charges. The existence of Dlamini as a formal partner indicates that the scheme required coordination. It wasn't a lone wolf operation. It was structured, deliberate, and involved multiple actors working together to maintain the facade of legitimacy. The core of the prosecution rested on Section 701 of the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, known as the FAIS Act. This law requires anyone offering financial services to clients in South Africa to be registered as a financial services provider, or FSP. The registration process involves proving competency, maintaining compliance standards, and submitting to regulatory oversight. It exists to protect the public from people who claim expertise they don't have or who operate schemes designed to extract money without providing real services. Ngcobo and Dlamini were not registered FSPs. They had no legal authority to solicit investments, manage client funds, or execute trades on behalf of others. The business they promoted publicly was, by definition, illegal from the moment it began. This wasn't a case of a legitimate trader who made bad calls and lost money. This was a case of someone operating outside the boundaries of the law entirely, misrepresenting their credentials and collecting money under false pretenses. The Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the FSCA, conducted an extensive investigation into Ngcobo and Dlamini. They reviewed financial records, interviewed complainants, and verified that neither man held the required licenses. The findings were referred to criminal prosecutors, and the case moved through the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court in Durban. The court heard evidence of fraud, multiple counts, and the systematic violation of financial services law. On May 7, 2019, the court handed down its sentence: 6 years imprisonment with 2 years suspended. Ngcobo would serve an effective 4-year custodial term. Additionally, the court imposed a R200,000 fine, but that fine was wholly suspended for 5 years, contingent on Ngcobo avoiding further fraud. The sentence structure meant that if he stayed clean for 5 years post-release, the fine would never be enforced. If he committed fraud again, the fine would be activated. The FSCA celebrated the conviction publicly. In their statement, they emphasized that the outcome sent a clear message against unscrupulous financial entities and scams. They framed the case as a precedent, a warning to others operating in the same space. The successful prosecution demonstrated that regulators were willing and able to pursue high-visibility targets who used digital platforms to deceive the public. Forex trading, foreign exchange trading, involves betting on the movement of currency values. It's a legitimate market where trillions of dollars move daily, driven by governments, banks, corporations, and institutional investors. Retail traders, individuals trading from home, represent a tiny fraction of that volume. The market is volatile, complex, and requires significant expertise to navigate profitably over time. Even experienced traders lose money regularly. Scammers like Ngcobo exploit the gap between aspiration and reality. They promise guaranteed returns, high percentages, quick wealth. They use industry jargon to sound credible. They show off luxury items as proof that the system works. They target people who are financially inexperienced, people who don't recognize that the promises being made are statistically implausible. The forex market doesn't offer guarantees. Anyone claiming otherwise is lying. Ngcobo's pitch was particularly effective because it tapped into legitimate social and economic grievances. South Africa has deep wealth inequality, much of it rooted in historical exclusion along racial lines. Ngcobo framed his business as a tool of economic liberation. He wasn't just selling forex training or investment opportunities. He was selling the idea that he was helping people break free from systemic disadvantage. This made skepticism harder. Questioning his methods could be framed as dismissing the aspirations of people who had been denied opportunity. His book, Cashflow Naked, published in 2018, reinforced this narrative. The timing is significant. By 2018, his criminal case had been ongoing for 4 years. The book was marketed as offering the naked truth, his side of the story, a response to media scrutiny. Inside, Ngcobo admitted to periods of financial difficulty. He described sharing rooms with staff, having his children temporarily removed from school due to unpaid fees. These admissions were strategic. They humanized him. They positioned him as someone who had struggled, just like his audience, and had found a way through. The book was reputation laundering. It was an attempt to control the narrative before the conviction became public. The book launch took place at Daytona in Melrose Arch, a luxury venue in Johannesburg. The choice of location was deliberate. Johannesburg is South Africa's economic and media capital. Holding the event there ensured national coverage. It reinforced the image of success even as the legal walls were closing in. The court proceedings began in 2014 and concluded 5 years later. That's a long time for a criminal case to wind through the system. During those 5 years, Ngcobo continued to operate publicly. He continued to promote his brand, publish his book, and maintain his social media presence. The delay allowed him to sustain the illusion of legitimacy, even as prosecutors built their case. The conviction itself rested on multiple counts of fraud. The fraud wasn't simply about losing money or making bad trades. It was about the misrepresentation of credentials, the false claim that he and Dlamini were authorized to provide financial services. Every client who gave them money was deceived about their legal status. Every transaction they facilitated was illegal under the FAIS Act. The sentence structure is worth examining. 6 years total, 2 suspended means 4 years of actual prison time. The suspended portion functions as a probationary safeguard. If Ngcobo commits another offense within a specified period, the suspended years get added to whatever new sentence he receives. The R200,000 fine, entirely suspended, works the same way. It's a financial penalty held in reserve, a deterrent against future misconduct. This structure creates a pathway for Ngcobo to emerge from prison and resume public life. 4 years is a significant period, but it's not the kind of lengthy sentence that destroys someone's ability to re-enter society. The suspension of the fine means he didn't face immediate financial ruin upon conviction. And because the sentence had a defined endpoint, it allowed him to frame the outcome as a temporary setback rather than a permanent fall. The FSCA's public statement emphasized the precedent-setting nature of the conviction. They highlighted the collaboration between regulatory authorities and law enforcement. They stressed that the case demonstrated their commitment to tackling sophisticated financial crimes, particularly those propagated through digital channels. The statement was aimed at other potential fraudsters, signaling that high visibility and social media followings wouldn't shield them from prosecution. Ngcobo's scheme worked because it exploited genuine economic pressures. South Africa has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Formal employment opportunities are limited, especially for younger people. Wealth inequality is stark. The promise of financial independence through forex trading resonates in this environment because traditional pathways to prosperity feel inaccessible. Forex scams thrive in such conditions. They offer a shortcut, a way to bypass years of education, credentialing, and entry-level work. They promise immediate results. and they use the language of empowerment to shield themselves from criticism. When Ngcobo talked about liberating the black child economically, he was co-opting the rhetoric of social justice. He was making it harder for people to question him without seeming to dismiss the broader struggle for economic equity. This tactic is common among financial fraudsters. They wrap their schemes in the language of opportunity, education, and community upliftment. They position themselves as outsiders challenging a corrupt system, when in reality they're simply adding another layer of exploitation. The victims of these schemes are often people who can least afford to lose money, people who are investing savings they don't have in the hope of changing their circumstances. The display of wealth plays a crucial role. Luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive events serve as marketing tools. They create the impression of success, which in turn creates the impression of competence. For someone unfamiliar with financial markets, the visible trappings of wealth are easier to verify than actual trading performance. You can see the Bentley. You can see the watch. You can't easily verify whether the person actually made profitable trades or whether the money came from other people's deposits. The economic context in South Africa made Ngcobo's scheme particularly potent. Youth unemployment runs above 50% in some regions. Access to capital for business ventures is limited for people without existing assets or credit history. The formal financial system can feel closed off, reserved for those who already have money. Into this environment walks someone like Ngcobo, offering a different path. He presents forex trading as democratic, accessible, requiring only dedication and the right mentor. For young people facing limited options, the message is seductive. One significant gap in the public record is the total financial loss caused by Ngcobo's scheme. The FSCA's statement confirming the conviction does not specify how much money was defrauded or how many victims were affected. Court records detailing these figures are not readily accessible in the public domain. This absence makes it difficult to objectively assess whether Ngcobo qualifies as Durban's biggest scammer, based purely on financial harm. His high public profile and extensive media presence suggest that his victim pool was large, but without confirmed figures. The claim rests more on visibility than on verified loss data. The lack of financial detail also raises questions about the scope of the investigation. Were there victims who didn't come forward? Were there transactions that couldn't be fully traced? Did the complexity of the forex market make it difficult to calculate exact losses? These questions remain unanswered. What is clear is that the conviction was secured on the basis of regulatory fraud, the unlicensed provision of financial services, rather than on a specific calculation of monetary loss. The crime wasn't quantified primarily in rand terms. It was defined by the systematic violation of licensing requirements and the deception of clients about legal status. Ngcobo's media strategy was sophisticated. He didn't retreat from public view as his legal troubles mounted. Instead, he doubled down on visibility. The publication of Cashflow naked while the case was ongoing was a calculated move. The book allowed him to present his own version of events before the court delivered its verdict. It gave him a platform to shape public perception, to frame any upcoming conviction as part of a larger story of struggle and resilience. The book itself adopted a confessional tone. Ngcobo acknowledged financial difficulties, admitted to moments of failure. This vulnerability was strategic. It made him relatable. It allowed him to position the eventual conviction not as proof of criminality, but as another chapter in a longer journey. He was constructing a narrative arc: rise, fall, and inevitable rise again. This narrative arc is common among public figures facing legal consequences. It reframes criminal conviction as a temporary obstacle, a test of character rather than a definitive judgment. It allows the person to emerge from prison with a ready-made story about overcoming adversity, learning lessons, and coming back stronger. The book launch at a high-profile venue reinforced the image of success. Even as prosecutors were finalizing their case, Ngcobo was hosting events in luxury locations, surrounded by supporters, maintaining the facade. The optics were deliberate. They signaled that he wasn't defeated, that the system might be targeting him, but he was still standing. Social media amplified this strategy. Ngcobo's online presence was carefully curated. Posts showcased wealth, success, and confidence. They attracted followers who wanted to emulate that lifestyle. Each follower became a potential client, someone who might be convinced to invest money based on the visual evidence of prosperity. The digital platform allowed him to reach far more people than traditional advertising ever could, and it allowed him to do so with minimal regulatory oversight. The media strategy also relied on testimonials. Satisfied clients, or people presented as such, would share their success stories. They would post about profits made, goals achieved, lifestyles transformed. These testimonials served as social proof, evidence that the system worked. Whether the testimonials were genuine or manufactured is unclear, but their effect was real. They created the impression of a community of winners, all following Ngcobo's guidance. The 4-year effective sentence meant that Ngcobo, convicted in May 2019, would likely have been released around 2023, subject to parole conditions. The suspended portion of the sentence and the wholly suspended fine created a conditional framework. He would remain under scrutiny for 5 years post-release. Any further fraud would trigger both the suspended prison time and the financial penalty. This structure left open the possibility for Ngcobo to re-enter public life and resume business activities. The sentence didn't permanently bar him from operating a business. It didn't strip him of the ability to write, speak, or build a new brand. What it required was compliance with financial services law. He couldn't operate as an unlicensed FSP again without facing immediate additional consequences. The question of what Ngcobo has done since release remains largely unanswered in public documentation. There's no readily available record of his current business activities, no confirmation of whether he sought legitimate licensure, no update on whether he's remained compliant with the terms of his sentence. The absence of information creates uncertainty. Has he transitioned to legitimate work? Has he attempted to rebuild the Cashflow brand under legal parameters? Or has he simply moved to a different hustle, exploiting the notoriety from his conviction? Public confusion is compounded by the fact that multiple people share the name Jabulani Ngcobo. There's a lecturer at Tshwane University of Technology, a director of inclusive education, and potentially others. None of these individuals are the convicted fraudster, but their online presence can create the impression that Ngcobo has rehabilitated and entered respectable professions. This conflation benefits the real Cashflow Ngcobo, as it muddies the search results and makes it harder for people to track his actual post-release activities. The sentencing structure reflects broader tensions in how financial crimes are punished. 4 years is significant but not devastating. It's enough to disrupt someone's life but not enough to prevent them from rebuilding. The suspended components create incentives for compliance but don't guarantee it. And the absence of restitution requirements means victims don't automatically recover their losses, even when the perpetrator is convicted. The FSCA framed the Ngcobo conviction as a precedent. They highlighted it as proof that regulators could successfully prosecute high-visibility figures operating digital scams. The case demonstrated that social media popularity and public support didn't insulate fraudsters from legal consequences. It showed that the FAIS Act could be enforced even against people who had built substantial followings. The precedent matters because forex scams, and financial scams more broadly, have proliferated on digital platforms. The barrier to entry is low. Anyone with a smartphone can create an account, post images of wealth, and start soliciting investments. The speed at which these schemes can reach potential victims has outpaced the speed at which regulators can respond. The Ngcobo case was significant because it showed that prosecution was possible, even if it took years. But the case also revealed the limitations of enforcement. The 5-year gap between the start of proceedings and the final conviction meant that Ngcobo had half a decade to continue operating, to continue building his brand, to continue reaching new victims. The slow pace of the legal system creates opportunities for fraudsters to exploit. By the time the conviction is secured, much of the damage has already been done. The case also underscored the importance of public awareness. The victims of Ngcobo's scheme were, for the most part, people who didn't understand the regulatory framework governing financial services. They didn't know to check whether he was a licensed FSP. They didn't know that the FAIS Act existed or what protections it was supposed to offer. They relied on visible markers of success rather than verifiable credentials. Regulators have since increased efforts to educate the public about warning signs of financial scams. Promises of guaranteed returns, pressure to invest quickly, lack of clear documentation, and absence of regulatory licenses are all red flags. But education campaigns struggle to compete with the immediate visceral appeal of someone flashing wealth and promising access to the same lifestyle. The Ngcobo case also raised questions about enforcement priorities. How many other unlicensed operators are out there? How does the FSCA decide which cases to pursue? Resources are finite. Every case requires investigation time, legal expertise, and coordination with law enforcement. The FSCA can't prosecute everyone, so they focus on high-visibility cases that will send a message. Ngcobo fit that profile. His public presence made him a target, but it also made him an example. Calling Ngcobo Durban's biggest scammer is a claim that rests on visibility rather than confirmed financial data. He was certainly one of the most high-profile forex fraudsters prosecuted in South Africa. His conviction set a legal precedent. His media presence was extensive, but without access to court records detailing the total financial loss or the number of victims, the designation of biggest is subjective. What isn't subjective is the systematic nature of the fraud. Ngcobo and Dlamini didn't accidentally violate the FI's Act. They built an entire business model around operating outside the regulatory framework. They misrepresented their credentials, solicited investments, managed client funds, and executed trades without the legal authority to do any of it. Every transaction was a violation. Every client was deceived. The scale of deception, measured in the number of people who believed his claims and the extent of his public influence, was undeniably large. Thousands of people followed him. Many attended his events, bought his book, and absorbed his teachings. The ripple effects of his fraud extended beyond the immediate financial losses. He contributed to a broader culture of distrust, making it harder for legitimate financial educators to reach people who might benefit from real advice. The claim of being Durban's biggest scammer also depends on how biggest is defined. Is it measured by total money stolen, by number of victims, by duration of the scheme, by public impact? Ngcobo scores high on visibility and public impact. Whether he scores highest on financial harm is unknowable without detailed court records. Several critical questions remain unresolved. The first is the total financial harm caused by the scheme. How much money did victims lose? The FSCA's statement doesn't provide this figure, and without it, the full impact of the fraud remains unclear. The second is the current status of Ngcobo himself. Has he sought and obtained proper FSP licensing since his release? Is he operating any businesses? Has he made any attempts to compensate victims or acknowledge the harm caused? Public records don't provide these answers. The third is whether Dlamini has followed a similar trajectory. As co-defendant, he received the same conviction and presumably a similar sentence. What has he done since release? Has he remained in the financial services space or moved to something else entirely? The fourth is whether there are other cases like this one that haven't been prosecuted. Ngcobo and Dlamini were caught, tried, and convicted, but how many similar operators are still active? The FSCA's resources are limited. Their ability to investigate and prosecute every unlicensed FSP is constrained by budget, staffing, and the sheer volume of potential cases. For every Ngcobo who gets caught, how many others continue unchecked? A fifth question concerns victim recovery. Did any of Ngcobo's clients recover their money through civil suits or asset seizures? Were there attempts to freeze accounts or recover assets before they were moved or spent? The criminal conviction answers the question of guilt but doesn't necessarily address compensation. At its core, Ngcobo's crime was impersonation. He presented himself as someone with the authority and expertise to manage other people's money in the forex market. He lacked both. He wasn't a licensed financial services provider. He didn't have the qualifications that the FAI's Act requires. And there's no public evidence that he possessed genuine forex trading expertise independent of the regulatory question. The fraud was regulatory, but it had real financial consequences. People gave him money believing he would invest it on their behalf. They believed this because he claimed to have the credentials and experience necessary to do so. Those claims were false. The business model relied on deception from day one. This type of fraud is particularly insidious because it exploits trust. Financial services require clients to hand over control of their assets to someone else. That transfer of control is predicated on the belief that the person receiving the money is competent, ethical, and legally authorized. When any of those assumptions is false, the entire transaction becomes fraudulent. Ngcobo's case also illustrates how regulatory fraud can be masked by cultural and social narratives. By framing his business as a vehicle for economic empowerment, he made it socially costly to question him. Skeptics could be dismissed as gatekeepers, as people who didn't want to see Black South Africans succeed. This rhetorical shield made it harder for victims to recognize the scam and easier for Ngcobo to attract new clients. The crime also had a performative element. Ngcobo wasn't just running a scam in the background. He was building a public persona, cultivating fame, seeking media attention. The performance was part of the business model. It attracted clients, generated credibility, and created momentum. The more famous he became, the more legitimate he appeared, and the easier it was to attract new money. The conviction marked the end of Ngcobo's public operation as Cashflow, the forex guru, but it didn't erase the impact he had. The people who lost money didn't get it back, the regulatory precedent didn't undo the harm, and the sentence structure with its suspensions and conditions left open the possibility that Ngcobo could return to public life in some capacity. The FSCA's statement framed the conviction as a victory, and in legal terms it was. They successfully prosecuted a high-profile case, secured a conviction, and sent a message to others operating in the same space. But victories in court don't always translate to victories for victims. Restitution is difficult to secure in cases like this. The money is often gone, spent, moved offshore, or hidden in ways that make recovery impossible. The case also highlighted the ongoing challenge of regulating digital financial services. Ngcobo built his brand almost entirely online. He reached clients through social media, marketed his book through digital channels, and maintained his image through carefully curated posts. Traditional, regulatory tools designed for brick-and-mortar financial institutions struggle to keep pace with the speed and reach of digital platforms. Enforcement requires identifying the fraud, gathering evidence, building a case, and securing a conviction. Each of those steps takes time. Meanwhile, the fraudster continues to operate, reaching new victims, extracting more money, and reinforcing their false credentials. By the time the legal system catches up, the damage is already extensive. The aftermath also includes the broader impact on public trust. When high-profile figures are revealed as fraudsters, it damages trust in financial services generally. People become more skeptical, which is both good and bad. Healthy skepticism protects against scams, but excessive skepticism can prevent people from accessing legitimate services that might actually help them. Ngcobo's case fits into a broader pattern of financial scams targeting vulnerable communities. These scams share common features: promises of high returns, displays of wealth as proof of concept, exploitation of social and economic grievances, and operation outside regulatory frameworks. They rely on the same psychological triggers: the desire for financial security, the fear of missing out, and the hope that someone has finally cracked the code to easy wealth. Forex scams are particularly prevalent because the market itself is complex and opaque. Most people don't understand how currency trading works. They don't know how to evaluate someone's trading performance. They don't know what questions to ask or what red flags to look for. This information asymmetry creates opportunities for fraudsters to make claims that sound plausible but are actually nonsense. The use of social media amplifies the reach of these scams. A fraudster can build a following of thousands or tens of thousands without ever meeting clients in person. They can post images, videos, and testimonials that create the illusion of success. They can cultivate a community of believers who reinforce the narrative and recruit new victims. And they can do all of this with minimal capital investment and virtually no oversight. Regulators are trying to adapt. The FSCA and similar bodies in other countries have increased their focus on digital financial services. They've launched public awareness campaigns. They've established tip lines for reporting suspicious activity. But the challenge remains immense. The speed at which scams can spread online outpaces the speed at which regulators can respond. The pattern also includes the response of fraudsters when caught. Many, like Ngcobo, attempt to control the narrative. They publish books, give interviews, frame the conviction as persecution rather than justice. They position themselves as victims of a system that doesn't want to see them succeed. This narrative framing is itself a form of continuing the scam, maintaining the loyalty of supporters who might otherwise turn against them. Jabulani Ngcobo built a persona, a brand and a business on a foundation of lies. He claimed to be a licensed financial services provider when he wasn't. He promised expertise he didn't have. He solicited investments under false pretenses and operated outside the law. His conviction confirmed all of this. The 4-year sentence he served was significant, but it wasn't the end of his story. The structure of the sentence, with its suspended components, created a conditional path forward. He could re-enter society, resume activities, and rebuild a public presence, as long as he stayed within legal boundaries. Whether he has done so remains unclear. The case set a precedent. It demonstrated that high-profile digital fraudsters could be prosecuted successfully under South African law. It showed that the FAIS Act could be enforced against people who built large followings and maintained public support. And it sent a signal to others, operating in the same space, that visibility and popularity wouldn't protect them from legal consequences. But precedents don't prevent all future crimes. They don't recover lost money. They don't undo the harm caused to victims. And they don't address the underlying conditions that make these scams effective: economic inequality, limited financial literacy, and the desperation that drives people to seek shortcuts to prosperity. Ngcobo's story is one of systematic deception, regulatory violation, and eventual legal accountability. It's a story about how someone can build an empire on lies, maintain it for years, and ultimately face consequences. But it's also a story about the limitations of those consequences, about how a 4-year sentence and a suspended fine don't erase the damage done, don't fully deter future misconduct, and don't fundamentally change the environment that allowed the scam to flourish in the first place. The title asks whether Ngcobo almost met his end. The answer depends on what end means. He didn't die. He didn't receive a life sentence. He served 4 years and walked out. His public career as Cashflow, the unlicensed forex guru, ended. But whether Jabulani Ngcobo himself met his end or simply adjusted his approach and moved on remains an open question. The criminal justice system delivered a verdict and a sentence. It closed one chapter. But it didn't write the final page.